Hi everyone, I'm Christina Kleehammer, and today I get to share with you about one of the chapters that isn't in our syllabus for this class. So I'm going to introduce you to the theory and then expand on its implications for us as communication scholars in society today. A few days ago, a fellow student and I were filming a local event called Community Uplifted. It was all about promoting economic growth through adult and community education. There were a lot of presenters, and many of them spoke about adult literacy rates and how important it is for people to know how to read in order to be productive, successful members of society. And conversely, in order to improve society, we have to improve adult literacy rates. This concept makes a lot of sense to us now, but that was not always the case for humanity. Thousands of years ago, it was not necessary for adults to know how to read in order to succeed in society. So, how did we succeed before we read? This brings us to Marshall McLuhan and the media ecology theory. Have you ever heard the phrase, "the medium is the message"? It was a famous saying of Marshall McLuhan's. He was a Canadian communication theorist who lived from 1911 to 1980, and he believed that media isn't just a way to communicate, but it's part of the communication itself. The message and the mode are inseparable in his theory. He claimed that changes in technology alter our symbolic environment. Every medium, whether it's a book, or a telephone, or a TV screen, or the internet, encourages different habits and engages different senses. If we analyze the major types of communication throughout human history, we'll gain a clearer understanding of what all of this means. As I mentioned earlier, there was a time in human history when people did not need to know how to read in order to succeed as human beings. So if we weren't reading and writing, what were our predominant ways of communicating? According to McLuhan, the tribal village was an environment where the predominant senses were opposite to the ones we use the most now. We were much more dependent on hearing, touch, taste, and smell. Then came the age of literacy. With the invention of the phonetic alphabet, we turned sounds into visible objects. This drastically altered our symbolic environment and brought us into the age of literacy. We started to keep records of events so that there was no longer as vital of a need to commit information to memory. Information in writing began to have more credibility for us than spoken word. Reading words, instead of hearing them, transformed group members into individuals. For example, when we read a story, as opposed to hearing it told, even though the words may be exactly the same, the act of reading a text is an individual act. And all of this has a visual dependence rather than the multi-sensory dependence of the tribal age. Those who could read and write became the gatekeepers of information and knowledge, giving them power over those who could not read and write. Then, with the invention of the printing press, literacy became increasingly common, and more people became dependent on their visual sense in order to succeed. Because communities could exchange common symbols with each other in a mass media context, this brought on fixed national languages and nationalist societies. Then we moved to the electronic age. In 1850, the telegraph changed our symbolic environment once again. Just as the age of literacy began to separate us as individuals, McLuhan saw the electronic age as re-tribalizing the human race. However, instead of the small, isolated villages of the tribal age, we began to move towards becoming a connected, global village. And now, here we are in the digital age. That's better. Not only is the internet common in our households, but many of us have access to it constantly through smart devices. Now individuals can connect in ways we never could before. This means that corporate media is no longer the gatekeeper to information. We are a global village that can share and access information freely over the internet. Neil Postman said we need to study media in the context of ethic and morality. Anytime there is a new technology, we have to ask ourselves, 1, what is the problem to which this technology is a solution? 2, whose problem is it actually? And 3, if there is a legitimate problem to be solved, what other problems will we create by using this technology? Sometimes these problems are difficult to see in advance. For example, how would the creators of the television know that it would facilitate a symbolic environment that, as our textbook describes, turns everything into entertainment and everyone into juvenile adults? We are the Sesame Street generation that freaked out when a presidential candidate threatened to cut funding to PBS. We have a hard time interacting with information that is not fun. Also, many of us spend more time communicating with others through a screen rather than face-to-face interaction. And critics say that the current generation of youth does not have the same level of face-to-face interpersonal skills as previous generations. But we also see many children now who do learn to read and master electronic devices at very early ages. So McLuhan and Postman would say that the changes in symbolic environment over time are not necessarily progress, but simply changes. McLuhan received a lot of criticism for his media ecology theory, mostly because he used a subjective approach to make objective claims. Critics wanted to know where his quantitative evidence was to support his ideas, and the truth is that there wasn't any. However, M. Griffin, the author of our textbook, explains that history is littered with theories that were ahead of their time and couldn't be immediately tested. So, how do we apply all of this practically to our lives today? As communication majors, we can become more and more conscious about the media we choose to communicate with as part of the message itself. For example, say we have information to give to a friend about a project we're working on. Do we send them a text at 11 o'clock at night? Do we email them so they can get it whenever they check their email? Do we wait and call them in the morning? Or do we just talk to them when we see them in class? These choices all affect the message itself. And finally, perhaps some of us can decide to go on and in the course of our careers, work to find the empirical evidence to support McLuhan's ideas. So there you have it, Marshall McLuhan and the media ecology theory. I'm Christina Kleehammer. Thanks for watching.